Sup? Welcome back, guys. This is going to be a special episode. There's been a lot going on, and so I'm going to talk a little bit about that. And then I'm going to show you some of the things that have come up in different conversations that are some of my favorite moments. So, before I ramble too long, don't forget to like and subscribe, comment, connect, and follow whatever you do on the platform you're watching. Just look for my furry face inside an orange circle and click whatever buttons are next to that. So this past week, there was Winter Storm Uri, and it came through Texas. And this was not like a devastating event within itself. It's not like some crazy winter storm came along. Just the place that it hit, Texas, especially the southern half of Texas, is definitely not prepared for what went down. We got about half an inch, 3/4 of an inch of snow, and that pretty much shut the state down. Some of the more like westerly and northern parts of the state got like a foot of snow, maybe less, I don't know. But here in Houston, we got like half an inch of snow, and it pretty much shut the city down. We lost power, like my household, we lost power for about 33, 34 hours. It was pretty intense. It was very cold. Like during the daytime, it wasn't too bad. It was probably around 40 degrees. And as long as we were inside, there was no wind chill, but we had no source of heat because we have a electric powered central AC and heater. So we did have to huddle together. My two youngest did get sick because they were playing in the snow Monday morning, and then there was no way to really warm them up. We drank some hot cocoa and stuff because we do have a gas, our stove and our oven are gas. So we didn't lose that at any point. That was good. 34 hours without power. We got the power back, and then we lost water for about another 48 hours or so after that. So it was a lot of ups and downs. Saturday around noon, we got our water back. And then I spent like the rest of the day Saturday cleaning because we had lots of dishes and everything else piled up. And then Sunday we did a lot more cleaning around the house and got things back in order. And also just took like a relaxed day and kind of didn't do a lot. So I'm recording this on Monday afternoon, and life is pretty back to normal. I'm getting caught up on all the things I lost because when the power was down for 34 hours, we also lost all the like cell phone towers that were in the area shut down. So at best we had roaming because it was so far away to get any cell service. And so mostly we could make phone calls if we tried to call somebody like 5 times, but there was no internet, there was no email, there was nothing. We couldn't do anything. It was a complete blackout. So it's been a weird week trying to get caught up, but going into Monday pretty prepared. So imagine this. I usually do one interview a week, and I record it on like Mondays and Tuesdays, and then I put it out the following Tuesday. Gives me about a week of downtime. Well, this past week, I had actually scheduled 2 interviews on Tuesday. I was going to do one in the middle of the day and then one in the evening. And that was going to give me 2 episodes to give myself a little bit more leeway. And all the power went out and the internet, and there was just absolutely no way I could do any kind of like remote interview or anything. No interview at all, really. I had no power to even turn on a microphone or something, even if that person had been here, you know. So at the end of the day, I didn't get to record anything, so I've been frantically trying to figure out how not to miss an episode but stay on theme and get something out. And so what I came up with was a clip show. Maybe it's because of WandaVision doing the whole sitcom thing that it just reminds me of how like sitcoms always hit like 6 or 8 seasons or something. Well, I don't know, usually after like the second or third season they start doing a clip show episode every season. So I thought, I've done more interviews than I realized. Like, I don't forget anybody, and I remember a lot of these moments from these conversations, but the actual volume of conversations I've had escapes me often. And so looking back through my YouTube trying to figure out what I was going to do, I realized how much material I have there. And so I wanted to pull some of my favorite clips from some different interviews and put those together kind of in the fashion of a clip show. And also kind of, bleed my heart about how awesome this experience has been. I guess I'm a fairly talkative person for the most part, but I'm also not very like extroverted. I'm very introverted, so once you get me to open up, I usually talk a lot, but I'm not like just talking to random people very well. But this experience has changed a lot for me. It's really forced me a little bit, just right outside my comfort zone, and that's forced me to grow a lot. And it's been a blast. I've always had a great admiration for the art of conversation, and so that's another thing that I've really been trying to develop and hone is my ability like to interview people. I don't really think of these as interviews. They really are conversations. They're very organic. Generally, I guess a peek behind the curtain at how the sausage is made. Generally, whenever I go into these conversations, I actually want to know usually like as little as possible. And so like if they send me a book or something, I'll read it. But my goal is really to find out more about the process. And so generally whenever I start to talk to somebody, what I do is I try to think of like the most thesis statement I can, like the best entry point for the largest amount of conversation, and that'll be my first question. And then I'll usually kind of tuck maybe two other questions in my pocket just in case the conversation dies and I need to kind of restart it. I do have, another question or two to the side there I can pull up. But generally, for the most part, the way that I handle these conversations is I have that one question. I try to ask it as upfront and early as possible. And then the conversation just goes from there. And if you've watched a lot of these, you'll see sometimes they get a little, like, I guess, off the rails, but it's like me and somebody else just talking about movies or something, We do get beyond just the creative process. But that's why I've always called them comic conversations. And that's something that I really hope comes through. I don't want this to feel like 60 Minutes or Axios or something where there's like all these planned questions and it's a very organic conversation, but it's my admiration for the art of conversation that really drives it. I'm always trying to find interesting ways into these different things and how to, bring out the best in the other person's perspective. Like, how can I have them explain something to the audience in a way that gives more perspective to it and makes it make sense to as many people as possible. So that's kind of my thought on these conversations. I just recently confirmed a conversation with somebody else from the community. We mentioned it a little bit last night, but Mark from Legion of Comics, we do have an upcoming interview in about 2 days that I hate to throw around the term once in a lifetime, but the combination of elements that have kind of all fired together on this has me really excited because it kind of is, if not once in a lifetime, like definitely once in an early career, if that makes any sense. Like, as long as I'm doing interviews and I'm making content, this is the kind of thing that can only, happen to you once in a lifetime at this point in what I'm doing. And so I'm really excited for it. I hope it shows like on my disgusting hairy face, but I'm really excited for this one. There's a lot going into this, and I know Mark is just as excited and nervous as I am, but this is going to be one of those things, like, I don't know, I think I'm going to be so impressed with myself over this one, if that doesn't sound like too prideful to say. So there's more announcements for that down the road. We'll be doing the interview in about 2 days from now, and that'll be out probably a little less than a week after that on both of our channels. Me and Mark will be both uploading that, so watch it wherever you want. I just really hope that people appreciate the way that this is all played out, because I'm really excited. I'm really excited for this one. So before I just like keep rambling and say too much, let's get into the clip show. And I just want to say thank you to everybody that subscribed. I finally broke 100 subscribers on YouTube, and it's just kind of exploded from there. I'm averaging like 2 to 3 new subscribers a day. So if you're watching this and you're not already subscribed, go ahead and subscribe. There's energy here. We're doing things and we're going places, and I'm really excited for the future. I have a podcast, so you can search that. It's listed under Cosmic Campfire on all of your favorite podcatchers and podcasting platforms. And you can always catch me in the Discord with, I'm on the Comic Burrito Discord a lot, and Wednesday Pull List has a great Discord community as well. So I spend a lot of time in those. And other than that, just TikTok, Instagram, Twitter. I'm on all three of those all the time. So find me on there, follow along, and check out some of my favorite moments that I've had in these conversations so far. I love what Mike said about dialogue, because as like somebody who kind of dabbles in writing, to me, like it's a process to get to the dialogue, but that's like where all the fun is. Once you have it all structured and you know why they need to say something, finding the perfect word economy and the perfect phrasing to deliver that is, it's so good, you know?
Oh, I have a list of dino related insults that are family friendly to include in each book. And it's, between that and that's a lot of stuff came from Ninja Turtles and Dino Thrashers and Street Sharks about insults. So it's like, okay, I can twist this a little bit. But dialogue, I mean, obviously the art is incredible. The art has to be on point. Dialogue has to lead you another way too. You have to be able to connect with them in that factor. So I know dialogue is hard to write. I think Noah can attest that I kind of did it pretty well, at least with the first issue anyway.
Yeah. You're right.
All right. Yeah. It's pretty caca. That's fine.
Yeah. And, talking to Noah here has been great. It sounds like he enjoys drawing these characters. And I think that translates, like everything that I see and hear, I'm like, oh yeah, like it looks like he's having fun when he's drawing those. Nothing's like stiff and awkward or feels like it was forced to be on that page. It looks like he's just like, oh yeah, like I want to do this, so I'm gonna do it, and like all that stuff just translates from your personality down to your book, and that's really impressive. I feel like a lot of people miss that.
That's awesome. Thank you for making that compliment. That just like got me through the rest of the day. I'm like, now I can face the world. Yeah, I can actually go out and have some confidence. I'm like looking at my page now and I'm like, that's the word I needed. I'm going. Yeah.
But I have promised Noah that the descriptions of the pages will be lighter in the next issues.
It's gonna be fun, Mike, when we get to issue 2, sort of like not paring it down in the sense of like taking out stuff we want to do, but like I liked how you I liked how Ryan brought up economy, that kind of thing. Like it's not getting rid of some stuff. It's like figuring out what goes where for the best effect, I
think it's like really super important to give like maximum value for the right price.
Yeah.
If you back the monthly version of Burn Residue, it comes out to be $30. And that's with shipping. That's with $10 of shipping. I just made $10 shipping across the board.
Yeah.
And it's like so $20 for 3 issues, you're paying a little more than you would pay for a regular comic. But it's like you get that excitement and that thrill of being a part of like this exclusive club that it's gonna be.
Yeah, it's worth it, man, because I tell you, like the 20, 22, 24 page format that's kind of like industry standard. I find myself
filled with ads.
Yeah, I find myself falling more and more out of love with that. Outside of like very, very like episodic stuff, The Flash, Usagi Yojimbo, stuff like that, like feels really good still at 20 and 24 pages. But I don't know. There's a lot of stuff. If you're doing like a 32 page or a 52 page, or even like these kind of smaller graphic novels and stuff, like 80 to 120 pages, like that's the stuff that really catches my attention, because it's still not like such a long format. I don't feel like investing, but it's long enough that you really get a story and you can really build something out of it,
Yeah, exactly. I mean, I definitely see the trend going more that way right now, especially with like what Brubaker and Sean Phillips are doing with them just going straight to graphic novel versions.
Yeah.
There was a moment when myself and my artist Rossano Pagioni, we were going to go out to publishers as a graphic novel. And like, so I was like, you know, he's from Italy. He runs his own publishing company there, which it's actually pretty cool. The book is going to come out in Italy before it comes out in America.
Oh,
so
that's pretty nice.
That's pretty cool. Yeah, I'm excited to get my Italian version.
Right. Oh, that's cool.
But yeah, it is cool. But you know, I told him, I was like, this is the way the market's going. But there's another way where we could do, you know, this Kickstarter, which he knew nothing about because that's not really a popular thing there. And yeah, it's doesn't hit the same way it does here. But you know, I told him, I was like, well, we could do the single issues first this way, and then we'll go back out to publishers as a graphic novel. But I think people just really like that contained read right now, you know?
Yeah.
Most top 2 comics, you know, you sit there and you read them in the time it takes you to like sit down with half a cup of coffee waiting to cool off, and it's nothing. Yeah. You felt, what did I just spend $4 for? 90% of this was ads. And
I think one of the most fun things that I ever read was so somebody had like a theory about why all the Mad Max films look different, like the Road Warrior and Mad Max and Thunderdome and the new one, Fury Road. Mm-hmm. Why do they all kind of not look the same? Why did it start off with like a decaying society, and then the next movie suddenly they're in like post-apocalypse and things like that. And the idea that like maybe being like all these different stories about this character of Max being told by different people, and just over the years it getting weirder and crazier and things like that, but always like this character of Max being Mad Max being the hero of it, and the idea of him
almost like it's a title or a mantle to be passed instead of this specific guy, know.
Yeah, and I kind of like that idea. There's a play that I saw a few years back called Mr. Burns. If you've ever heard it. So it's called Mr. Burns, a post-electric play. So there's 3 parts to it. So there's 3 acts in this play. The first, so it's basically supposed to be electricity stops. Like electricity dies for some reason, and people just basically try to figure out how to go on. So the first act of it are a whole bunch of people who've just met each other. They're kind of like sitting out in the woods. They're eating some provisions, and they're just like regaling each other, like telling the story of The Simpsons. They're telling specifically the Simpsons episode, like the Cape Fear episode, where Sideshow Bob was stalking the Simpsons family, and they went out to the lake, and it was a parody of like the Martin Scorsese remake of Cape Fear. Okay. And then the next act is 8 years later, and these people from telling each other like the story of this television show have now turned this television show into a stage play. So they travel from town to town. They act out the stage play, and they also act out like the commercials in between. And they get things wrong, and they change things to kind of fit the idea. The third act is 70 years later. All those people are dead now, but the story of The Simpsons, the Cape Fear episode when they traveled, has lived on, and now it is this bizarre kind of like Greek theater thing. They have all these articulate masks and all of these like they just it's become effectively like the year like 300 300 AD Greek theater, and all of these, like Sideshow Bob has now been replaced because in the scope of The Simpsons, Sideshow Bob was not the main villain. Mr. Burns is. So all the Simpsons stories, Mr. Burns has to be the villain in it. Yeah. And so like the idea of it's just such a cool idea of like post-apocalypse this sort of like well-loved television show now becomes like the myth of our time, and we use it to like tell stories and tell all of these different ideas. I think that's such a cool thing. Like, and I wonder if like the creators of that, like, ever thought, like, do you think like Seinfeld would be taught in a post-apocalypse society? Would we be talking about like Kramer and all these people?
Yeah, right.
Like, would we be telling the story of like the 5 bartenders that lived in Philadelphia and how like you shouldn't follow their example,
right?
Things like that.
How can you reach people outside of comics that aren't really already into comics?
That's such a good question. I think like the industry is looking for as well. And I loved your first part of that too, is because I actually went into, I have a master's in TV writing. Now, obviously I was already into comics. I've been reading comics all my life and I wanted to write comics, but I see a lot of people trying to break into TV. It's hard. I'm trying to break into TV as well, but a lot of advice I've gotten from TV writers who know my background is like, keep writing comics. If you keep writing comics, you're going to be able to sell your IP and get into a TV writing room in some regard. So if you write comics, it actually opens up to those other fields, and you could sell your IP depending on, how well you do. But yeah, comics is actually a great starting point, and it's cheaper. It's cheaper to make. I mean, it's obviously expensive still. You could like, my goal is $5,000, and I'll be spending $5,000 to get everything printed, to get everything colored, so, and to get everything done. So yes, it's still expensive, but it's cheaper than making a feature length film. And it's I think your time is used wisely, and because you have to make a lot of spec scripts for TV. So you have to make like, a lot. Yeah, you have to keep on writing, and you don't know if it's gonna be everyone's favorite. And you're like, oh, what am I doing with that story now? At least with a comic, you're selling it, and you're also kind of using it as your spec script. I mean, you have to show that you write TV as well. So write your spec scripts, but like, it's a good opportunity for people to see your writing, but also kind of be able to utilize it and like make it your business and be able to sell it. Anyways, going back to your other question, how do you get those people to go into comics and not believe that it's just superheroes? I think it's not as much on the indie side. There are ways for the indie side to do it, but in the Marvel and DC side, I do think they do need to bring that superhero crowd into comics. Like, there's so many people that watch these superhero movies that are not reading comics, so they have to do that first. In the indie side, I think it's using other platforms. So one great platform, and I've been mentioning this a lot, is Webtoons and Tapas. They have millions of people viewing their comics, much more than people reading comics that go to the comic book store and buy it online. So utilize Webtoons. I see actually a lot of mainstream creators. I just saw Justin Jordan. He had a Webtoons that he's collecting now through Kickstarter. So you can actually see the marriage between Kickstarter and webcomics and Webtoons. There's a really great fan base there. So I think really trying to marry the physical with the digital aspect of Webtoons or webcomics can really bring in a whole different audience to comics. And I think Kickstarter is actually that bridge. And I hope it continues to be that bridge and they utilize that. So yeah, I think there's this cool marriage that definitely can happen.
See, I love stuff like that. Any kind of process stuff like that, I eat that up. It's a lot of fun. In fact, like so when I started with this, it was back in the 90s, and it was Image did their thing, and you're like, wow. And then all these other little things popped up, and it seemed like the possibilities were limitless. And I started going to conventions, and I was like, okay, what am I gonna, I want to go meet some of these people who make this cool stuff that I love. And so what am I gonna do as far as interact with them? And I found out you could get sketches from artists, and I was like, that's cool. So what am I gonna get? Am I gonna get a Spider-Man or something? I'm like, well, they probably get asked to draw Spider-Man all the time. So yeah, I mean, it's multifaceted, but for this part of it, I'm like, I'll bring them my own character, and maybe that'll be something interesting and different for them, and maybe they'll enjoy that. There are a few other reasons I started up, just I wanted to do a character from this region because I felt like some of the things that had been published weren't exactly right. So I thought, well, I'm from here. Maybe I can nail down some of those little things that make it more authentic. I'll talk to you more about that later. But so I started, just coming up with characters and stuff, and I'd bring them around. And what was fun is once I had enough characters, I would give them examples and say, you pick one. So it was always interesting to see what character a different artist would pick. And I have probably like 150 of these now from over the years. And it's just, I wanted to make an art book out of them. And I talked to a lawyer, and the lawyer said, well, because it's not explicitly work for hire, you really shouldn't. So I just post them on the Humid Press accounts on social media now.
The book actually originally was drawn, the original idea was drawn in just many years ago when I was in college. I did like just 6 pages, and it had no words. It was just 6 pages. And it was the same idea except condensed into 6 pages. So there wasn't really much going on. It was just, creatures bursting out of a wall and then him running across the street. And this time it was like a huge like truck came by and like smashed the aliens, and he kind of got away at the last second. But years later, I was kind of like looking for writers to work with to do a comic, and I never came across like a writer who's kind of like, a script enticed me enough. And eventually I was like, you know what? I think I want to do something on my own. But because I was kind of frustrated, even going to comic book shops, like I just wanted to see a specific kind of a book that I had in my head. And at that time, even though now I kind of appreciate the superhero stuff, I didn't really want to do a superhero thing. And I just wanted to do something that was really different. So I took that premise, which was 6 pager, and I said, okay, I'm going to do it again, but this time I'm going to make it bigger, more ambitious, um, with writing and everything, and lettering and everything. I do everything myself. And so that's kind of what kind of got it rolling. But from then on, you know, I realized that I don't. The book actually went through a lot of editing. There's entire panels that I redrew that were cut out and pasted, pages that were removed, pages that were added. There was a lot of things that are going on because to me, every page has to be interesting. Like even if it's like a conversation, you can keep the reader there if the dialogue is like pulling you in, and also the way you draw it. But really, the dialogue is everything in those instances. But so I kind of just like basically thumbnail everything and just try to make every page work in terms of a composition. But even though I did make a lot of mistakes, but I would always go back and correct them. And I wish I had if you take the original pages and maybe lightbox it, you could still see some of the original panels underneath the pasted ones. Because I did make a lot of changes along the way. But so that's kind of what I went about. But real quick, when it comes to the animation, you know, I do like animation. I love I'm a big fan of like the older kind of like golden age, like let's say for example the Max Fleischer Superman. I think especially if you see it on Blu-ray now, that stuff looks absolutely gorgeous. The Max Fleischer Superman. It's just the drawing is so, the thing I take away from animation is, which is what I'm learning now, and I kind of made that mistake doing the book, and I'll tell you about what I mean in terms of like, because I was showing the book to professionals, as I was making it, and like Eric Larson said to me, you got to find a way to simplify this, because if you're trying to make a deadline, it's like almost impossible, especially if you're doing it yourself. It's like you got to, so I would look at animation, and I noticed in animation their drawings are very simple, but they're really good drawings. They're simple, but they're really strong. So Max Fleischer, you know, it's or like let's say a Miyazaki. I'll look at a Miyazaki
Mm-hmm.
and it's just so simple,
Mm-hmm.
but so strong. Snow White. I look at that, you know, the older
Yeah.
animation. So anyway, kind of ran on there for.
I guess like how do you find comedic beats? Like what is your process for finding what's funny, or do you just kind of go with your own?
Yeah, you know, it kind of just like flows out when I'm writing. You know, I'll think of like a funny situation. You know, whether it be stuff that I've maybe seen growing up, and you know, or maybe like kind of take an idea that I might have seen in a movie, but change it to where it could fit the book, or kind of just playing the two together
Yeah.
and just writing it out and kind of coming up with that idea.
Yeah. Yeah, I often hear comedy writers, they cite that as like one of the most difficult genres just because you know what scares people is like pretty generic in a lot of ways, or even that you can get away with not showing what's scaring somebody.
Yeah,
Action is
sure.
obvious, it's over the top, it's explosive, it's in your face. Romance is two people in love, but whenever it comes to comedy, it's completely subjective, and what's funny to one person is not funny to another person. It really depends on the people that are consuming it and what their interests are. And it's really hard in comics to do comedy just because, without the audio there, it makes the timing that much harder to find because you have to find neat ways to kind of like control how they're reading it in order to nail the timing on it.
Yeah, and that's one of the toughest things is to put that comedic aspect into the comic, because not I mean there's not too many comics out there that kind of use comedy. It's just, a lot of action and grittiness. So that is a challenge, kind of getting that comedic aspect into the series there.
Yeah.
I honestly, as much as I would, here, let me think about what I'm trying to say. I just truly desired, because like you said, I feel like the story wouldn't really fit here if I wrote it here in San Diego. Like I just feel like it wouldn't be the same.
Hmm.
Like I know the setting, I know, this city, I know I've lived here my entire life. I know this
Yeah.
place. And so when I was writing it, the story originally, I originally kind of intended it to be here in San Diego, but then when I was really getting to the heart of it, I was like, this doesn't belong here. Like it doesn't belong here in San Diego. And so I really wanted it to feel natural. Yeah, I didn't want it to feel forced because I'm here, so therefore it needs to be here in San Diego, here in California, whatever. And so I was like, I need to find a place. And so when I was like, I actually did some research. I was like, okay, where is like a border town? No, not Nevada, not Arizona. I mean, Nevada's not even on the border, but not Arizona, not New Mexico, not any of these places. And so when I found, Brownsville, I was like, this is kind of perfect, because
Yeah.
it was like, in a way, it was like kind of the opposite of San Diego because it's on kind of like the other, like, side of the border,
Yeah.
on the other coast of the border.
Hmm.
It's kind of like opposites. And so when I found that, I was like, man, this is it. Like, and so it just, when I found that place, it kind of just clicked in my mind. And so,
Yeah.
yeah, I don't know. I feel like I really don't really get to talk much about the setting of Crossbones because as a creator, you just want to get the character most known, most
Hmm.
recognizable. And so
Yeah.
when I'm talking to people about Crossbones, I never really get to talk about the setting, which is San Diablo. And so just talking about it now, I'm just really excited because it's like, this is like a big part of the story. And,
Yeah.
when I'm out talking with people and, kind of marketing the story, I guess, I don't really get to talk about the setting because
Hmm.
it's just like, I need people to recognize the protagonist or the antagonist even sometimes.
Yeah.
So now that we're just talking about the setting, I'm like, man, this is like a character in of itself. The
Hmm.
setting, it has a characteristic of itself, and so I'm super
Oh yeah.
excited to be talking about it.
Yeah, yeah. I always thought Sicario. Sicario was a movie that like nailed the way that it created the world and the vibe, and it really
Yeah.
felt because it does. Like again, I hate to say certain things because it almost feels like people are gonna like think of the border the way that it's kind of represented. Like
Yeah.
it doesn't feel dangerous, but there is a tension. You know,
Yeah.
probably kind of like going through an airport because TSA is there. You
Yeah.
know, and you know everything. When
That's
you
a good,
cross the border, there's guards and dogs everywhere, and there is this
Mhm.
like tension, you know. And Sicario was a movie that just nailed that vibe and that feeling of border tension.
Yeah.
And the first two issues of Crossbones not so much a focus there. I think mostly because those took place in like Mexico.
Yeah.
But whenever you bring in the agents in the third book here, like it starts to feel a lot like Sicario. I'm like, okay, this is really like giving me goosebumps, you know, like it's really cool because you can feel just like that extra level of tension and like almost like violence is about to happen, but it may or may not
Oh,
ever
boy.
actually happen, you know.
Oh boy, is there ever. It's funny that you actually mentioned Sicario because that is a big influence on the comic book itself. Because as I feel like you were just talking about it, just the whole subject matter of, I feel like, Mexican cartels, just like a few years ago. I mean, as soon as Narcos came out and Narcos Mexico, I feel like the whole topic kind of blew up. But back when
Oh yeah,
Sicario,
yeah. I have a friend. He works like in rural Texas, right? And he's like a Hispanic guy like you, born and raised here in Texas. His first language was Spanish, you know, and then he pretty much became a white guy, you know. And so he worked in a factory with all these white guys, and he would
Yeah.
always tell us, you know, like anytime like something would happen at home or whatever after Sicario came or after Narcos hit the waves.
Yeah.
He would go to work. He's working with all these white guys in a factory. Be like, oh yeah, this and this happened yesterday. Like, ay, lo siento, amigo. I'm like, yeah, that somehow Sicario and Narcos like completely changed culture, you know, and it started to
Really
seep
did.
in. So
Yeah, it really did, and I'm honestly really grateful for it because honestly, it's hard to kind of separate that from fiction, you know, because in your mind it's like, oh, this is just a movie, or oh, this is just a Netflix show. Because I remember when I first watched Narcos Mexico specifically, I was watching it and I was like, wow, this is so good. Oh my God, this is like such a great, amazing like show and stuff. But then I realized these things happen, man. This is real life. And so I wanted to also tell this story to kind of bring light on this subject matter. And I think that Sicario and Narcos honestly really, like you said, really hit it on the head because it's like, man, this is something that is honestly, genuinely happening, you know, in the real world. And so, I mean, Crossbones, it crosses that line into the fantastical, you know, with, you know, superpowers. And, you know, obviously we don't have a town over in Texas that is, you know, meshed together with a Mexican town, you know, it's, you know, that's all fiction. But with that flavor of Narcos and cartel, like that is all real, you know. That is a real
yeah. I mean, fictionalized versions of real events, but those things are happening every day. And that's that. I mean, I'm like you, like I feel very grateful that that kind of media has like caught on and people are watching it because, you know, like you don't know what's going on over there. Anybody who ever says like fleeing to this country from the southern border and not being considered for asylum, like that's insane to me because these shows and these movies are telling you like this is what's happening, you know. And I think that opening scene it's not the opening scene, but in the first book of Crossbones, whenever they're driving and they fall into the ditch and stuff, 100%. Like at that point, it lets you know like this is like real cartel stuff because that's how they do it. Like they trap each other, you know. Like this guy gets a hint, and so this guy gives, and there's rats and everything, and it's always like crisscrossing. And then in the third one, you know, you see the video footage of the shootouts in the towns and stuff. Like these are innocent people. There's a woman with her little girl right there, and the news cuts away from her getting shot in the head. Like that's real life. That's what it's like down there for these people that are fleeing from violence. And I'm thankful that there is media out there that shows that, because that's the unfortunate bad side of what like borders and politics are doing, because that's where a lot of the power is coming from, is that wall they want to build so bad, you know?
Yeah. Yeah, it's true. And honestly, like, as a Hispanic, as a Mexican, I love Mexico. I love going down there, and I love spending time there. I love eating the food there. I love the culture. But man, Mexico is just in a bad state right now, you know, and it's not because of the people themselves, you know, it's not because of, you know, Mexicans, but it's because of bad people. And there are bad people everywhere in the world, you know, there's bad people here. And so that's when I like, when I hear people tell me like, oh, don't go down there, like there's terrible people there. And it's like, dude, there are terrible people here in San Diego.
Yeah.
Like, you know, San Diego has a really high rate of sex trafficking. And it's like, dude, I thought this was America. I thought this was, you know, the land of the free and the safe, you know. It's like, dude, no. Just because there's a border right there doesn't mean that these bad people go away, you know. And so I long for, you know, a sort of change, you know, the change of perspective of like, it's not necessarily the individuals themselves, but the fact
because there's good people there.
Yeah, exactly.
That's the thing. Know? Like, why are you going there? I'm going there because there's good people there, you know, like there's so many more good people. Just good people have less weapons, and the border and the American laws have created a certain sense of power. Yeah. You know, if weed was as worthless on the street here as it is there, it wouldn't be powerful to move it across the border, you know, like that's where they get the money. That's where they get the power, you know. They don't have the government structure to fight against that kind of stuff, you know. It's too easy to corrupt a police officer. And you know, so like to me, that's where the biggest mistake is. Like, how much could we be doing if we would, you know, kind of help stabilize the Mexican government and make them immune to corruption. Make sure that they have all the resources they need so that the cartel can't possibly sell enough weed in order to like fund the country. Yeah. You know, like that's the problem.
Yeah, exactly. And it's just like, but people don't want that, you know, people just want the easy way out, you know. And it's like, man, I desire, like, especially because I live here, I live like, again, 10 minutes away from the border. I desire, like, we're neighbors, we're like legitimate neighbors, me and them, like us and them and whatever. It's like we're legitimate neighbors. And if I were to look at my neighbor and say, oh, just because your situation is worse, I'm just going to build, you know, an emotional or even a physical wall around you, like, therefore it's not going to leak onto me. But it's like, man, like, their baggage is kind of leaking onto ours, you know. And like I strive, or not strive, I mean, I hope to one day strive, you know, to help make, you know, Mexico even better, you know, like, you know, like you said, just to be stable, you know. And isn't that just like the goal is just to be at least stable, you know? I don't know, it's weird.
No, I feel you on that, because I mean that's kind of the big argument we're going through right now with universal basic income and universal healthcare and stuff. Is like, what the people in favor of this are saying is like, there should be a bare minimum. If we're a first world country, there should be a floor that says like nobody falls below here. And that's the argument for it, you know. And that's kind of how I feel about Mexico, like, as their neighbor, you know. Like, we're at the point where we're basically driving through the bad neighborhood and we're locking the doors. But if they really wanted this stuff in our car, they would just break the windows, you know?
I know, right?
That's kind of how putting this whole wall up and all that feels. Is like, we're just going to, if we can't see them, it's not bad, you know? And that's how I feel about Mexico as our neighbor. We should be providing not the same floor for them that we have for our own country, but wouldn't it be in our best interest to provide some kind of floor that says like, at least things won't get this bad? So that the government knows like, we can't afford enough uniforms for all of our police officers, but it'll be okay because the cartels won't have all the power without the uniform, you know?
Yeah. There you go. It's actually really funny. Even before, like, you know, 2016 and, you know, this whole wall talk, San Diego and TJ have actually had had a wall for like years. We've had a wall for years and years. And it's like, I mean, when we first heard about it, it's like, I mean, isn't there already one? You know, so it's really funny. And so in the story of Crossbones, I made it a point that there wasn't a wall or there wasn't a border. You know, I wanted it to be a point that the readers knew that this was one city, that this was one town, like cut in half by two countries maybe, but they're just meshed together, and now both their problems are each other's problems. And so later on, I'm so excited because it's like, man, as an indie creator, it's like I want to write that right now. I want to get to that right now. But you know, I also want the story to be fairly paced. You know, I don't want to rush things and be like, like these things over here are crazy, and it's like, wait, what? I thought we were talking about this over here. So that's the struggle of an indie creator.
Yeah, well, let me ask you about that though, because I thought it was really cool the way that you introed the first book and everything, and they're listening to the radio and they're telling you who Crossbones is. And then like as things progress, like you kind of have like the news there to like build the world around them and explain the border situation and that beautiful like symmetrical map of San Diablo and all that. Like,
yeah,
all of that's really cool. So like, how long and how hard did you work to find a way to deliver all that? Like, was that first scene like that from the beginning, or did it take you a long time to figure out how to work all of the geography into it?
So originally I just had that idea from the start, the whole idea of San Diablo. And honestly, it was all Roman, my artist. And so I gave him this idea. And I was like, this is the setting and this is the idea behind the setting. And so, and then I knew how I wanted to start the book. I knew that from the get-go, I wanted people to realize what this city was, you know, what the setting was, just to establish this world in a way, just to be like, this is the world. This is a different world than the one we live in, but it's similar, and this is the way that it is. And so when I passed that on to Roman and I told him, you know, I gave him the script and everything, I passed it on to him, and I was just anxiously waiting for that one. The second page, I believe, is the one with the map. And he honestly, just what he did was he looked on Google Maps, he went on Google Earth, and just drew it. And he just, you know, and I was like, man, I'm really glad you didn't like, you know, do any drastic changes to the layout of how it actually is, because that's honestly perfect. You know, I want it to feel real. You know, I wanted it to feel like, honestly, this could happen in real life. You know, obviously it's an extreme, sure. But, you know, I wanted it to feel grounded and real. And I honestly think that he executed it really well.
Chameleons, like that was just really cool the way they're like invisible. Like that art concept was really cool. I was like, what is going on here? And then it just really brings you into everything as they like go into the building the first time and they become visible, you know?
Yeah, that was all. I mean, that was all Martin. Yeah, and I can't. Yeah, forget. I mean, he did so many. He's incredibly prolific, and he's constantly like. You follow him on social media. He posts almost every day, probably new kind of concept art or sketches, and so I think the invisibility kind of cloaks in that went through a few different like iterations. But yeah, I thought that the way that he kind of, or what he eventually settled on, I thought it looked great. Because I was I was honestly kind of a little concerned as I was writing it. I was like, how do you do invisibility and not have it be kind of the corny like dotted lines, you know?
Yeah,
figure.
like Peanut style or something.
Yeah, and no, yeah, well, yeah, I mean, yeah, he's the artist, harder than I am, so he figured it out. And, yeah, I thought it looked great.
Yeah, that was a really cool idea, and that ending surprised me. I was like, I really don't know what's gonna go down here, but I felt like that was like a really key element to that whole story. Is like I just really enjoyed being in the story, and it almost felt like what could the ending be, you know, and how important is it? Because like there was just something really fun about the vibe. Like I could feel the tension in the air, but I didn't know why or what to expect, you know. And I thought that was really cool the way that y'all nailed that.
Thanks. Yeah, I mean, I mean, my guess would be, I think that Martin did a particularly good job of. There's kind of like his use of kind of like what I'm trying to think of what it's called, negative space. The way that like the way that like the certain pages, there's just like there's one page in particular where there's kind of like the back and forth dialogue between the father and the kids, and then it kind of pans out, and you see that the entire time they've been sitting in like a downed airplane.
Oh yeah,
like the wings in the snow and stuff, and like the page has a lot of negative space where there's just like not a lot of detail, but even just that small like kind of world building detail of this like downed plane, it just like it adds kind of like a history to that's like off the page that just like lets your imagination fill in like like how did this plane get downed, and it just kind of like speaks to the world that the story is set in more broadly, that like it's the kind of place where like you will take refuge in a downed airplane in this like, you know, snow covered apocalypse or whatever. So yeah, I mean, I think his style in general can lend itself very well to that kind of almost like disquieting tension.
Yeah, it reminds me like whenever they're like talking with the family and they're realizing the problem and everything, it reminds me a lot of like No Country for Old Men, the Coen brothers movie adaptation, you know. The way that there would be like these long scenes of just silence where like you know, like he's just sitting there in the chair and like you know that like this isn't good, but you know nobody's saying anything, and it makes you as the audience feel like kind of weird and awkward, you know. And I think that works. Like he's building tension in those moments by just having like a lot of just like you said, like negative space, like just empty open air is just there, and you can feel the tension through it, you know.
Yeah, well, yeah. I mean, I agree. Yeah, I mean, I love No Country for Old Men. Yeah, and I mean that movie does a great job too of kind of the same thing, like you're saying, like making silence kind of menacing.
Yeah,
I mean, yeah, a thing that I like. One of my favorite writers has a line that says, "Only speak if you can improve on the silence." So,
oh yeah. Oh man, that's
a lot of my stories have very little dialogue. It's just I'm like, well, is this improving on the silence? No.
Yeah.
And then off you go. But
wow, that's awesome.
Instead of having to slog out 24 pages, I might have to slog out 12, and then I just write him an email that says hot tag, and he's got to do 12. Or we usually do it in 4s or something like that, so no one's slogging anything out. But that's how it goes.
There's even sometimes where like Kevin may have like a hot idea, and he's like, I just want to run this out, and he'll just go as far as he goes. You know, and like we both know where we're going and what we're doing. So it's kind of like Kevin's just going to run an idea out as far as he can take it, as far as he wants to go. That I've got a cool idea for a scene, and he'll bang out a scene, or I got an idea for an opening, and he'll do an opening, and then we just kind of go from there, you know.
So what is the process? I assume y'all kind of like outline together, and then like, hey, you write these couple pages, and I'll write these, and then
I mean, you just basically described it. Like we'll kind of get together, we'll powwow about an idea. Kevin will shoot me a text, be like, hey, well, I got this idea, and then we'll talk about it on the phone, and then we'll kind of hammer out an outline, and then we'll just start doing pages, because there are a lot of writers that may not work from a hard outline, and it's not like a specific like A, B, C, B kind of outline, but it is very much like a free flowing kind of trail, because there are two people writing it, so we need to know where we're going.
Yeah.
And sometimes it's looser than that. It just depends. We might have just a basic idea what we're trying to do, and we might start the script and like let it dictate to us where we're going to go with it, but we still tag in and out on the script through like Google Documents or whatever, and like whenever he stops, I can see what he's done in the previous pages and try to imitate that, so you don't know that there's two writers on the book. The whole idea is you don't know where one of us stops or when the other one begins. It's we try for every time to do that, and I think we're pretty... I think we've gotten pretty good at that part of it at this point, because we're good at mimicking each other's style at this point.
Yeah.
So, well, whoever's dictating the book tonally at that point will take lead, and they take point, and then the other one dictates how the rest of the book goes. Because we did that, and then there's another story we just did for Top Cow where I think I was point. I started it, and then Bobby came in and did some things with it. So he just imitated what I started on. So
yeah,
we tend to do that with each other. So you don't know who's doing what.
And some of the stuff will even be as easy as like with the Top Cow thing. Kevin, what, 8 pages?
I think it was 8. Yeah.
Yeah, and you basically wrote 8 pages, and then I just went over it and did kind of like a read through, changed some dialogue, maybe here and there, maybe kind of raised a question or two. Well, what about this? What about that? And then we just
kind of punch up.
Yeah, we just kind of go from there, and that's been pretty effective too in some of the
I think you rewrote 3 of them or something like that. It was something where we were that, but that's just we do whatever's required to help get the book done. So whatever.
Yeah, Kevin will do the first draft. We'll get notes from our editor, and then I'll come back in and do the rewrite or vice versa. But I mean, it's just because, like I said, there's 2 of us, so we might as well see what we can kind of tackle, and it helps in promotion when we're doing these giant ass Kickstarters, man. Like we're trying to make $24,000 on Kickstarter. That's a lot of work for 2 people to do.
Yeah.
So it's nice that we can kind of split the load. It's nice that we can split costs with artists and letterers and things of that nature and colorists. So it's beneficial in many ways, and it's fun. Kevin comes from if I can speak about Kevin, he comes from a music background.
Oh, okay.
Kevin was in a very popular band for a very long time, toured the country with many big bands, right, Kevin? You played many rock and roll shows.
I played a lot of rock and roll shows in 12 years, yeah. So, yeah. And then Bobby was a radio DJ for what, 10 years?
Yeah. So like we understand the idea of like collaboration to its core. Like if you're writing a song, I've never written a song, so I'll let Kevin speak to that. But I mean, like when you're doing a radio show with 3 other people, it's not important whose idea it is. It's important about the final product and what you put out. And as long as you've kind of moved together and you've made the best thing that you can collectively, that's what's important. Like it was never about my idea, your idea. And it's never about that's my joke, Kevin, on page 6. They have a good laugh. Like who gives a fuck? Because at the end of the day, we're just trying to make a good book.
I think I'll start and then I'll tag you in, Brian. Cool. I think we give the illusion that it is all connected. And have you seen the movie Crash?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. It's sort of like that. It's sort of like where everything seems to be connected to each other, but in reality, everything is crashing into each other. There are certain things that are linked to the Black Kind family, to the Kind family. I shouldn't say Black Kind family, but the Kind family, because their last name is Kind. And there are going to be certain things that are linked straight to the Nightingale family, which is Elizabeth, the young lady who got shot. But then you're going to see that there are what I like to call it, how when you play a video game and all of a sudden there's a side story or a side, just something that you can actually go play that is in the story, but it's not part of the story.
Mm-hmm.
Well, then we show you that too, because that's how life is with us. We're connected, we crash into different individuals, but then all of a sudden something will happen that is not part of us, but yet we we understand it, or it brings revelation to us, or all of a sudden it challenges our perception of how we are viewing our reality. And that's basically what, in a nutshell, we want Black Kind to do. We want Black Kind to entertain people, because an entertaining story, I mean, you know, it's a phenomenal story. But at the same token, we want you to be challenged throughout the entire evolution of this story. We want you to identify your implicit bias, because even while me and Brian are writing this and brainstorming and going through the process, we identify implicit bias that we have, and then we're conscious enough to remove it and actually just, you know, okay, let's identify that, but let's not put our implicit bias into the story. And that's what we love about it, because if we are doing that throughout the process, then we know the readers are going to be doing the same thing as they go through the process too. And in the end, you're like, wow, that was an awesome story. But at the same token, I see this from a whole nother perspective, which is the beauty about it.
Yeah, I think that's really interesting. It sounds like what you're saying is you're trying to let the reader discover themselves, you know, through the story. Because I definitely feel like what you're saying is true there. You know, they do talk about the implicit bias aspect of it. And when I look at how I felt just reading the first issue there, like, I feel like there's a lot of assumptions I could make about certain characters and certain elements of the story based on what I would assume, you know, but instead of just showing the other perspective, but to like let the reader discover it. I think that'll be interesting whenever the story starts to come full circle.
Right.
Excellent. Yeah, spot on. It's not much to add. You know, it's perception and 6 degrees of separation, and those are the angles that we are coming from and playing with.